No progress on Gallagher contract. Stewart and Winstanley become target for angry Chelsea fans. And Chelsea set to appoint a new loans manager. Hello there guys, what is going on? Daniel Childs back here again. It's Thursday. Hope you've had a really good week so far. Nearly at the weekend. And from tomorrow we will be focusing on the Man City game. I'll be giving you my predicted lineup for that game, the one that I think Pochettino should be going for. So if you're new around here and you want to see more Chelsea content, make sure you don't miss any of that. I do my pre-match analysis where we kind of mainly focus on the Chelsea starting 11, but we'll look tactically at Man City as well. And then, of course, next week is to build up to the Carabao Cup final. But today, news show, let's just jump into it firstly with Conor Gallagher. So Gallagher scores a double at Crystal Palace, a place he loves to play, not just for Crystal Palace on loan, but now for Chelsea, Selhurst Park. Those goals are crucial to Chelsea. And Pochettino is raving about Gallagher post-game, calling him priceless. And it really felt like another sign of how important Conor Gallagher is to this Chelsea team. After some lean weeks for Gallagher, where he has, I think, faced fair criticism for his performances. But again, the question has been posed, why aren't Chelsea securing the future of Conor Gallagher? Why are Chelsea seemingly overlooking a player who is homegrown, who is performing consistently, who has years to go in his development, who clearly loves the club, clearly plays his heart out for the club, is connected to the club, is connected to the fans in a way many of this squad simply aren't. And they're overlooking that. And again, there's been reports, very much signalling and very much rubber stamping that there has been, at the very least, no progress and fears that we could reach the summer with Chelsea trying to sell Conor Gallagher again. Matt Law reporting for The Telegraph that Telegraph Sport understands there remains no significant progress over a new contract for Gallagher, who Chelsea accepted 2 bids from Everton in January of 2023. He was included on a list of available players last summer and did not rule out selling him in this year's January transfer window. The expectation remains, though, that Chelsea will make Gallagher some sort of contract offer to extend his deal, but an agreement is still far from certain. Ben Jacobs also reporting here that Pochettino has always sought to keep Conor Gallagher, but the club could sanction a sale regardless of his opinion if the other members of their transfer hierarchy, Bowley, Igbali, Shields, Winstanley and Stewart, agree it is in the best interests of the club. I just want to read out these numbers because I think they really they tell a story about Conor Gallagher, and I do think that these numbers are not groundbreaking, are they? I think this is very much the eye test being helped by stats to back up that eye test. We all know how impactful Conor Gallagher is to Chelsea, or at the very least, even if you're not Conor Gallagher's biggest fan, I think you have to admit that he quite clearly is important for the current head coach. These numbers are from 23-24, and for those listening on the podcast, it's a bunch of metrics: games played, assists, chances created, tackles, interceptions, possessions won, duels won, fouls won, and it has Gallagher for what he has so far this season, and then it puts him in the club rank, so where he ranks compared to his fellow Chelsea teammates. So for games played, he's joint first. Assists, joint second. Chances created, he's second. He's first for tackles, interceptions, possessions won, duels won, and joint first for fouls won. Generally, those numbers tell a very clear story that he is one of the leading members of this squad in terms of his impact, how important tactically he is when he hasn't been available. And it's not to say that when there's never been a time when he's been available and played and started that we haven't played well. Obviously, that's a nonsense. We saw it very recently against Liverpool and Wolves. But it shows you that just on the numbers, he's a valuable player to Chelsea and he's a valuable player to Mauricio Pochettino. So then it begs the question, why aren't Chelsea offering him that new contract? I just think it comes across as very insulting. Again, maybe I'm being too harsh because it's the wording of a reporter. The idea that some sort of contract offer, as if, well, something will come towards him, like we'll offer him something, but in terms of a full-hearted sort of commitment, isn't really there for Conor Gallagher. And I do feel there are very strong echoes of the Mason Mount situation. I know Liam Toomey talked about this, that maybe it isn't as toxic as that, but if I'm Gallagher and I know how much he loves Chelsea, but if I'm Gallagher's agent and I'm being dispassionate about this and I'm just thinking about the player's own career, I just run down your contract, because then as a player, you're then in a very powerful situation. And as we've seen before, Gallagher will put his foot down. He is not just going to walk out of Chelsea easily. He's not just going to walk out of his contract easily. And I would like to think that this time, if the club tried to do a similar thing that they did with Mason Mount, I'll put it that way, then fans won't instantly turn on Conor Gallagher. I think it'll be slightly different, because I can't see Gallagher himself suddenly turning around and signing for Man United. Now, we know football moves very quickly, but I'd like to think that Gallagher, maybe because of his commitment to Chelsea, unless he's given a ridiculous offer from, say, like Man City, for instance, he gets an offer to go to like a team that, are clearly at a higher level than Chelsea currently, and maybe, Pep Guardiola says, I've got one more season at Man City, I want you to be a key player. Maybe that changes his mind. But I do think that for Conor, he will have the backing of Chelsea supporters, and we're seeing a lot now that the focus is going beyond the head coach, because I think it's relevant. And I also think it's relevant now to Stewart and Winstanley, sporting directors, and Liam Toomey's piece, where he did speak about Conor Gallagher, but this is a more general thing about angry Chelsea fans, a lot of the criticism going towards them. Is it actually fair? And before I get into the piece, I want to be fair, because I have been very critical of the sporting directors. I have stated that I don't really trust their judgment. I don't think the system is very clarified. I think, based on everything I've read and heard, I think it allows not only for maybe ego to maybe take charge, but then also just a lack of, as I say, clarity and a lack of judgment. And when you have too many cooks in the kitchen, which looks like it's only going to be added to by someone else from Brighton at Chelsea are recruiting now. And I look at Man United, who have been a mess, but they are approaching Dan Ashworth to get him from Newcastle. There is no messing about with Manchester United. They are going out for the best in class. Ineos is in there as well, and they're looking to change tack. They're looking to modernise their approach, and they're looking to do it by appointing one of the best regarded sporting directors in England over recent years. Michael Edwards hasn't been working for a few years, but, Dan Ashworth rightly gets a lot of praise. When I was speaking to Ryan Adset, who's a Brighton fan, before our game against them earlier this season, he was talking about Ashworth and how important he was to that recruitment. Then on top of that, the work he's done at Newcastle to recruit very good players that got them Champions League football last year. It's not just one man, but you look at his influence in clubs, and you look at how quickly Man United have moved, when Chelsea are still looking to add more names to a situation and a back room that already looks cluttered. So then I get to what Liam Toomey was saying in terms of explaining. So the belief underpinning the transfer strategy of Chelsea's owners is that youth in football is underrated. This is why they have repeatedly paid premium for potential rather than proven quality, a break from conventional wisdom. It has set them on a path no club has walked before, one that demands they develop young talent in their first team while competing consistently at the highest level. That kind of friction and hypocrisy is something that maybe not hypocrisy, but it's one of those friction things that I've always questioned about this strategy, because you are still Chelsea Football Club. You do still have a massive fan base, and you still do have a massive spotlight on you that is never going to go away unless Chelsea, as I say, become one of those teams who maybe get relegated to the... I'm not saying, obviously, none of us want this to happen. We want to be back in Champions League. We want to be winning Premier League titles. But there's just a reality that, and I've always said this, that I've made this point before, that the ownership maybe thought that they could do a Men in Black sort of pen to everyone and we'd all forget what happened in the past 20 years. You can't do that. And I wonder the collateral damage and the pressure it puts on very young shoulders who, with a little bit more wisdom and experience around them, could be in a better environment. I think some of those players have done very well to still perform in that environment. But that in itself it feels weird. But the line that Chelsea's owners believe that youth football is underrated, I mean, it just sounds like gaslighting, and it just sounds slightly farcical when they've been trying to sell Conor Gallagher. It looks like Ian Maatson doesn't really have a future at Chelsea. And sure, some of that obviously has to do with a head coach in Mauricio Pochettino not playing him. But Armando Broja, I wouldn't be surprised if he's let go in the summer. Trevor Chalobah too. They obviously parted ways with Mason Mount last year. And there is a growing belief that the pathway that seemed like it was opened a couple of years ago for Cobham into the first team is being closed a bit now, because this club has invested a lot in players, very young players who are going to need minutes from elsewhere rather than developing them internally. And it just, for me, like Chelsea, youth football is underrated. But it feels like this ownership and the previous ownership, it's underrated by Chelsea, because they look beyond their own academy, which is one of the best in world football. And as I constantly say before someone, comments and tries to straw man my argument, it's not to say that we only ever look for solutions internally. And Cole Palmer is a perfect example of this. I think Malo Gusto is a perfect example of this too. I have no issue as a fan. Maybe if you're someone that really wants to see Cobham come through, maybe you're of a different belief, or maybe you're somewhere else. My personal belief is I have no issue and will never sit here and complain if Chelsea spend money wisely in the transfer window to bring a player in who clearly looks like an upgrade on whoever was playing there before. Maybe we didn't have someone playing in that position, or someone, for backup, for instance, we didn't have Malo Gusto last year, which was massively detrimental with Reece James' injury problems. We've got him this year. You see how important he is. That looks like very smart investment. I start having a problem when I'm looking at players who we spent a lot on, who I'm told need years and years of patience, don't look radically better than what we had before. You could argue in some cases worse than what we had before, and look very flawed technically, and don't look at all seasoned, even close to it, that requires them having years and years of patience, when again we're likely going to be selling off young players who maybe did actually deserve a bit of patience and would have been at a similar level that we could have developed that would have been better for the first team. And I think that that's where a lot of people's frustration comes. And, maybe you are someone of the belief that you just want to see big players come in. Maybe you're of the belief that there should be more of a balance between. I think that's where I sit, right? I think there should, of course, be a balance between understanding. You don't just fill a squad with 28-year-olds and then be completely bemused a couple of years later when you suddenly have real problems in terms of being able to sell those players on, and that squad suddenly looks like it's aged very quickly. I still think that it's fair to criticise them, but also balance it out with the fact that, yeah, sure, I don't think they're doing a great job, but they have brought some decent players in, like a Cole Palmer, Malo Gusto, Benoit Badiashile, who I think has been a good addition, Enzo Fernandez, Moises Caicedo. I like the look of Nicholas Jackson. I like the look of Noni Manawake. Christopher Nkunku, sure, was bought by Vival and Bowley, but I think that's a very smart addition too, if you just want to go more general about the ownership. There needs to be concerns, and I think the Dan Ashworth appointment this week for Man United, or it looks like it's going to happen, I think says a lot. Final thing to speak about here is a loans manager that Chelsea are appointing. I know there's been some reaction to this as well. Chelsea are set to name Swansea City's head of football operations, Josh Marsh, as their new loans manager. Apparently, the appointment has been driven by Winstanley and Stewart in conjunction with Carlo Codicini, who's been a part of the technical staff and sort of loan staff for a number of years now. Apparently, he's starting next month. Now, there a bit of background on this, right, is that in the case of Josh Marsh, apparently his brother, I believe it is what Chelsea Youth, I'll put the tweet up on screen now, has been working at Chelsea already. So there's a family connection there. And CFC Path definitely suggests as well, go and follow him. Great for sort of Cobham Academy detail and background. He does a lot of great work. Saying here that he was the head of recruitment at Huddersfield from 2018 to 2022. And that Chelsea have had a very good relationship with Town in those years, especially with loans for academy players. So hoping it's a step in the right direction. And I think that I did see some reaction. Oh, Chelsea are finished. We're bringing in people from Swansea. When you focus, this is where nuance is very important, right? Because when you focus in on what his specific role is, I don't think where he comes from is the end of the world, especially when you consider the fact that Chelsea have got a lot of loans wrong this season. And I think it says a lot that we have sent Alex Matos to a club where a lot of young players of ours have gone and actually thrived, Huddersfield Town, and he's quickly showing that it's actually looking like a really beneficial loan for his career. So I don't think the fact that he works for a championship team means that he can't make the step up, that actually his expertise in this level, and probably an expertise of championship football too, is going to be important for me personally, because I think that for loans, it's a really great ground to send young players and get them that first team experience on a consistent basis. So you want to have an open mind. We can be critical. We can have criticism of the recruitment structure, but I'm never going to sit here and tell you everything's. It's never always like black and white. In some situations it is. In some situations I think Chelsea do make very crap decisions, and I don't really see an argument against it. But in other cases, I think it is a case of just not being nihilistic all the time and saying everything's crap, because this is someone clearly who has worked well within an operation that Chelsea have clearly sent, Brashear Humphreys to this season. And previously, Huddersfield also have shown their ability to, very much develop academy players well for Chelsea and other clubs as well. So we'll see how this thing goes. And I think loans is maybe a forgotten part of the transfer strategy of your club, because I think to a lot of fans, it's not as exciting, right? Sending someone on loan is not the same dopamine hit as signing a new player, but it is very important, especially in terms of developing players for the future and making sure if you want to get that player back into the first team, they're going to an environment that is going to take them on to the next step of their development in senior football. And we saw how beneficial that has been to players that have returned in recent years. I think there's a number of examples, but Tammy Abraham, Mason Mount, Fikayo Tomori, Reece James, Trevor Chalobah, number of loans, made such a huge difference for them, and I think made them so mature that when they returned to Chelsea, they not only had all that background of Cobham and performing and surviving and thriving in an elite academy, they also then had senior football and reps. When they were brought in, it wasn't like, oh, it's going to take them another year to get acclimatized to playing regularly. That wasn't the case for them. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this show. If you're a Chelsea fan and you want more carefree content, please do hit that subscribe button. Really helps the channel out, as well as the like button and sharing it around with friends so more people can get involved in the community. And you can follow Son of Chelsea across socials at Son of Chelsea on TikTok, on Instagram, and on X. Thank you.